The flip side. The person, not the celebrity. Who they are besides the fame. Join us now on The Flip Side.
Welcome to Flipside here on The Bridge on Power 104.1 FM, all about love. My name is Draz, and it's time for us to get into a conversation with someone who I already think is incredible. I've been reading a book that she's written. I've never written a book, but that's one of the things we're going to get into today. One of the questions I want to ask, how do you even arrive at that point? But you're very, very welcome, Kellen Nakaye.
Thank you so much, Draz, for having me on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming through and giving us of your time. Now, Kellen, you're a writer.
Yes.
Apart from writing, tell us about yourself. What else do you do?
Okay, I'm a telecommunications engineering professional.
Okay.
But
that sounds so complicated. You did like physics and math and
yes,
whatnot.
But I stopped working in that profession in 2018. So from 2019 till now, I have been writing, but I do write for other companies, like on a contract, content, business development. I keep writing, and I do business elsewhere. Yeah, so that's me, and my mission in life is to encourage and motivate and uplift those around me. I really believe that the essence of life is living a purpose-driven life, and for me, that's the vision I'm all about. I am passionate about seeing people pursuing purpose.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds good. So from telecommunications to communicating purpose, something like that. Yeah, you just left the tele out, but the communications was relevant.
Yes.
When we come back, Kellen is going to tell us more about herself, her book, and we'll get into some of the things she addresses in her book. It's time for us to get into this conversation with Miss Kellen Nakaye, who has written an amazing book titled Journey to Wholeness. Now, I was reading this book yesterday and just being blessed by how vulnerable you actually are. But I was thinking, what made you even get into writing? And you just shared that you are a telecommunications professional before, and then you made the switch to writing. How did you know that you could write, and how did you make that career switch?
Okay, I had, in 2017, it had been a decade of doing all kinds of things, because for me, growing up in dysfunction, there was always that you have to help out. Like, there's no money, there's all this pain. So from 15 to 25, I was just speaking on anything like modeling, beauty pageants, multi-level marketing, violin classes, like anything to get money.
Teaching how to play violin.
Yes.
Wow, you play the violin.
Yeah, but
you learned a bit and then
I learned for a while, but now I have not played for like 4 years.
Okay.
So there was that. Looking out for myself. Yeah. I think the only thing I was living out is sin. Like, I would do everything for money apart from sinning. So, you know how we all want to be a certain person at 25? There's that something about the age 25.
I know.
So I was a few weeks to my 26th birthday, and I was thinking, God, I'm not close. I'm not really close. Of course, things like writing had been in my mind because I've always journaled, like written my thoughts. So I was really, really frustrated. And at that time, it was just me looking for clarity from God. Like, I've given my best to all of these things, but I have no results. I can't tell anyone that I've been working for the last 10 years and this is it. So when I finished that 5-10 minute prayer, it was so clear, like, Kellen, write, like, take it from the journaling and write blog posts and write books. It was more like God just bringing me back to that dream I've always had, but there was always confusion of what will get me the money. So I remember even I published actually my first book in 2019. It's called You Are Great Too. It's a personal development book, but with a Christian perspective. So even then, it was always about, God, how do I get the money out? Like, I was so focused on the money, but how I came to writing was getting that clarity of like, okay, I can do all these things, but what exactly am I gifted at?
Yes.
What exactly can I make impact
And what's
with?
my purpose? Because I remember
Yes.
you sharing about being, living a purpose-driven life. And I guess you're really a fan of Rick Warren. I saw some quotes in your book
Yes.
as well. But then in your writing, you've even mentioned, you speak very openly about trying to make it and growing up in dysfunction. Basically, you're very vulnerable. If you just go ahead, purchase her book, you'll see she's very vulnerable. You share stories from your childhood so freely about your struggles with your mother, growing up in a single parent home, and at some point running away even from your father the first time he visited you, and the matron helping you understand that you shouldn't do that. You're very, very vulnerable in this. And I don't want to tell people too much of what's in the book, because I do want them to purchase it and read the book. But were you always that vulnerable? And is it why are you that vulnerable when it's not normal in our society?
Yeah, actually, most of our families, like, you keep quiet about family things. You don't just speak out. And then for me, I grew up an only child. So there wasn't always room to express yourself. You don't have brothers and sisters that you're talking to.
Yeah.
But it really, for me, started when I went to therapy. Like, after my mom passed, it was like
Sorry
the
about
striking arrow, to the extent that I felt like I'm even done with God. I keep telling my friends that was the time I went in prayer to tell God we are done. So, and I was very suicidal at that time. I kept waking up and telling God, why don't you just take me? I'm saved. I'll come to heaven. But of course, the more I just woke up and I wasn't dying, somehow I just sought therapy. I really went to counseling. And of course, a counselor will only help you if you speak up. So she would really ask me and wait for me to speak. And that whole process helped me to look at things objectively and understand what is my fault and what is not my fault. And also, as a member of Watoto Church, we have SAIL. So SAIL has really taught me to be vulnerable. Like, people openly speak up, like, to pray for each other. And around that time also, that's when I joined Watoto Church. I think in 2019, I had been in another church. But it's my SAIL members that were always holding me, like, because I was in so much pain, so much suicidal thoughts, that it's all I could talk about in SAIL. And the fact that they gave me that freedom and they didn't make me feel bad, like, to speak out or to be the Christian that is having all this trouble.
Yes.
Because sometimes also in Christianity, we tend to feel like if you have trouble, it's like you don't have enough faith. So people fear to speak out.
Yes.
But for me, that's just 4 years ago is when I've been learning to get vulnerable through SAIL, through counseling, and just realizing that actually the more you talk about these things, they lose power over you.
That's so true. There is power in testimony. I think it's in Revelations 12:11 that it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. That section about overcoming by the word of their testimony it speaks to the power of actually being vulnerable and sharing. And what would you say to someone, because now, like, a setting like SAIL, for someone who's listening who doesn't know what SAIL is, it's members of who attend the same church but live in the same community, coming together once to just talk. Usually there could be 10 people, there could be 3 people, but the number can vary. And it's sharing in such a setting. There's a risk that your information is going to go out. How did you overcome that? Because a lot of people don't speak up for that fear of, what if people go and start ridiculing me and talking about me and I become a topic of discussion everywhere. How did you overcome that?
Actually, for me, I've learned Satan has a way of wanting to keep us locked in experiences. So he keeps convincing you that you're going to be ashamed and all. But the Bible tells us to be keepers of one another. So how I look at my brothers and sisters in the body of Christ is like they are looking out for me. When I was speaking out, I was looking for help. I was like, okay, I don't want to just kill myself. Like, I will go to hell if I just kill myself. And for me, it didn't come to my mind that they are going to shame me. They are going to, go and expose me to whoever. I just kept thinking they are going to help me. So I think that truth should remain in you. Like, God is not about shaming anyone.
Yes.
He's not about embarrassing anyone. Like, if he propels you to speak out, just fearlessly go and speak out. And if someone really shames you, embarrasses you, then they are not under the Spirit of God.
Yeah. And then there's God even has a remedy for that, and that's even you forgiving those people. So you can't control their behavior, but when you know that your healing is in your speaking up, you go ahead and do it. We'll be right back, getting into even more of what she addresses in her book. It's time for Flipside. I'm here with Miss Kellen Nakaye, who has written a book titled Journey to Wholeness. And the first one is You Are Great
Too.
You Are Great Too. I like that because that way it always also reminds you that there are other people who are great. There's no need to compare yourself.
Yes.
You just live in your own, greatness. But we're talking about how you're so vulnerable in the, and one of the things in the book, and one of the things you talk about is how you grew up in a single parent household. You share about how you the first time your father even came, all you heard about him was that he was bad, and then the first time you met him, you even ran away from him. In the book, you share that, and you go ahead to talk about how there's things, the way we are brought up can affect us as adults and basically influence the way we respond in certain situations. You share some stories about how in relationships, how you accepted certain things you shouldn't have, and it's because of maybe how you were raised, maybe the absence of your father. Can you just get into that? What someone might be wondering, why they keep why they keep finding themselves in that cycle, dating the same type of men, but they've not yet realized that maybe it's because they're looking for their father. So just speak to that person.
Somewhere in Psalm 139 there's that verse where David is saying, search my heart, O God. So just to be honest with yourself, sometimes you have to sit down and search your own heart, and the reasons are always there. So for me, when I really started my therapy, because I was like, you know what, I pray for this, I must get this, but then I end up with this, and there's a way I'm comfortable with the opposite of what I prayed for. So I really needed to search my heart. So I always had trauma response, when you don't have a father figure growing up, it's like this little miracle. Like if someone comes around, it's like that little miracle of something you've been missing, and they can be treating you anyhowly or what. But even just growing up in a single parent home, for me, it's funny how I've been born again 21 years, but for so long, I don't know how Satan schemes around, you grow up in a single parent home, you live in neighborhoods where families somehow are arranged like that. Somehow growing up, my friends, our neighbors, everywhere we live, everyone had one parent. And you know how in church they preach marriage, what? So first of all, for me, it looked like it's very difficult to get married. It's very difficult to get in a relationship. That is the mindset I had. I always felt like I'm not held in this aspect of life. And then now you don't have a father in the home. You keep wondering, how does that look like? So it deposits that kind of desperation in you. When you're approaching relationships, you don't have the prudence that you need to first of all single out, okay, how is this person treating me? And no one was there to show you that this is how a woman is treated. This is how I've been speaking to your mother, so this is how someone should speak to you or treat you. There's just all that confusion going on in your head. But for me, the biggest problem was all those doubts, that it's hard to get married, that it's going to be hard to get someone to like me. And that I was allowing that to control me, to make my decisions. And probably not even allowing God to help me, because I feel like God is going to make me wait, take me in circles, and
I want this
I
now.
can do this on my own.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think it's something to talk about, because we live in a society today where what a broken situation these days, nobody wants to consider that their situation is broken. And maybe you can also speak to those people, because we become defensive when people point out the flaws in our lives. Whether you grew up in a single parent home, whether it was the loss of a parent, unfortunate, a parent died and you grew up with that, or there were some bad choices and you didn't have to grow up with out both parents. But sometimes people are offended when people consider those situations broken. And what would you say to someone who struggles with that, because they're like, if my family is a complete family, how can you say that we're broken? And yet I think it's in actually acknowledging that something is broken, that you can actually even just find healing and thrive even in that situation.
Yeah, of course, all of research and psychology has showed like much of how we will respond, we are taught in our formative years, like those first years. Like, I think that's why God tells parents to be good stewards, like teach them in the way of the Lord, your children, so that when they grow up, it's not hard for them to follow the Lord. So, and I think at the heart of dysfunction, like what Satan wants is for us to hate God. Because, if you're growing up without a dad or a mom, the first thing you will think of, how can God let this happen? That's the first thing you will think about. So it becomes difficult to see things from God's perspective of like, you're broken, but it's not God's fault. Like your parents don't get along, but it's not God's fault and it's not God's design. So for me, all those years, what I did was anchor myself in the Word of God. At least I always read my Bible and I knew the truth. I knew that a family is supposed to be complete. My parents are supposed to be there teaching me in the way of the Lord. And if they are not doing it, like something is not right. So I would continually pray for my parents, pray for myself. But if anything is contrary to what God says, even if we don't want to take it, it's not God's design. And accepting that we are seated in something that is not God's design is the beginning of a solution. Because now, at least you can find out, for me, when I grow up, how best can I raise a family that it's in God's design. How best can I approach relationships as a woman or man, that I'm at least following God's design, because God's design is the best. It's what is good, not the counterfeits of the world.
Wow, so good. Something else I felt that we should even address. We do have about 12 minutes to go, but I wanted to find out, we're in Africa. It's different. It's usually very difficult to say to your parent, but you're not being being okay here, you're not treating me right here. Most times we respond in obedience, even if it's oppressive to us. And in the book you share about, even now you shared about how you because of how you grew up, you did everything. You were hustling, you taught violin classes, you did this, you did that, but it was always in response, because there was an expectation. It's, I raised you, you must do this for me. I raised you, you must do this for me. It's because of you that my life has been like this. So you didn't choose to be born, but the person who brought you into the world is blaming you for their circumstances and expecting you to make it better. How did you navigate that, and what would you say to someone who's still in that situation, maybe feeling a little bit oppressed but can't speak up and they're struggling?
Okay. Even me, at first, I wasn't seeing it. I wasn't seeing that the roles are reversed, that, I'm just 15 and I should be a child. I shouldn't be looking for a job. I should be taken care of. I didn't see it that way. Me, I was just helping my parent. I was just being a good child. But I think Psalm 68:5 says, God is the father to the fatherless.
Yes, he is.
So we have to realize that in a broken world, even our parents can have a human experience. Like, they can struggle, they can fail, but God promised to step in. Like, nothing gets him by surprise. He said, if they fail, I'm going to step in and be your father and do all these things for you. So my advice is, like, you lean on God. You lean on God. And like I said, at the root of dysfunction is that we can grow up hating God. That is what Satan wants. So that you question, how can God let this happen but your advantage is in actually running to him, and he's not blinded from this, that a parent can fail, but he said his arms are wide open. You have to run to him. And for me, over the years, through that too much praying, I was protected from just being angry at my parents, and you're angry at them, because also that can happen, and kids run away from home. I think the thing I did so late was seek out counseling. Like, I didn't always feel like you can go and talk about this to anyone. So you can also seek counseling, like seek out a person to talk to about this. Honestly, in most cases, you won't be able to reprimand your parent and tell them A, B, C, D. The best you will do is pray. But you can seek out counseling, especially if you're at a risk of violence at home from your own parents, or even this being a child and you're working, it sets you back so many years. Because I keep thinking, if I had sought counseling, probably I wouldn't have had to go away from home, but people would have pointed me to, you can join Compassion and get school fees, you can be in this, you can be a part of this and that program, and I didn't get a chance at that.
Wow, amazing. If you'd actually spoken up earlier, you might have received the assistance that you need. I hope that as you're listening in, you're being blessed by Kellen's story, which she tells so well in her book, Journey to Wholeness. And she'll be sharing with us where you can actually access the book in just a little bit, but you can also go follow her on Twitter. Her handle is in the tweet that we put up. Just go to @PowerFM Uganda and you'll be able to follow her there as well. One of the other things that she addresses as a young lady, because this book focuses a lot on single ladies finding, their peace and their wholeness away from the topic of marriage, which is so heavily esteemed in our society. And you do share some of your stories, the struggles here and there, how God has kept you regardless of, the risky situations you found yourself in. But you've come to the conclusion indeed that it's God's timing is the best, and you're not seeing marriage as the ultimate goal. How did you arrive at that place? Regardless, society thinks different. When you're not married, when are you getting married? That question comes up so many times, and yet I think sometimes there's something bigger. Is being single bad? Can't I just be single and serve God? Can't I just be celibate and serve God? People have all these things where they because of how we've been raised, marriage is right up there, amongst sometimes even more than salvation, the way it's talked about in society. How have you handled those pressures, and what would you say to the young lady who's going to get your book? What's she going to find in there to encourage her?
Yeah. Well, I think for me the turning point came from there was a relationship I was in, and I could have died. Like, I could have gotten killed, diseased, anything. Like, it really shook me to the core to come to a place of like, okay, God, what is wrong with me? Because for me, that is one area where like I was reserved with letting God in. Like, God be in my finances, in everything, but here, just a quarter of yourself. So I think the first revelation God gave me is like, marriage is like an idol for so many of us. Like, you can pretend, like you're writing your books, but you're set on finding your happiness in when someone is desiring you and all. And God doesn't want that. Like, God wants us to be fully satisfied in Him. And I think Satan sets it as a temptation for us to try and find our happiness in these other things, because he knows that we will do anything and everything to get those things, just like you will do anything and everything to be on God's side when you're satisfied in God. So for me, I had to really pray about the idol of marriage, like, because Jesus couldn't have died on the cross and went through all that pain just to give me marriage. Like, that is one thing, but it's not all.
It's not the main point.
And you see that when he was dying, it was about us getting back our devotion to him. So for me, it was all about understanding, okay, marriage from a biblical perspective and not from society and the world. Because as a young woman, society tells you like your happiness starts when you get married, like that, those are the movies, those are the songs, like you're almost insignificant if you don't have someone desiring you. But you see that in Genesis, even before God introduced marriage in Genesis 2, in Genesis 1 and a portion of 2, like he's giving a man and a woman a purpose individually, like have dominion, multiply, but he's not saying that the woman can't do it without the man. So for me, I also had, it's very risky, like the things that the Holy Spirit was telling me, because at one point God asked me, Kellen, think about a life where, what if your life is a life where you'll never have a spouse? Are you going to kill yourself? Like, is it, like, just think about that possibility, because you're risking too much, you're putting yourself so much on the line. But what will happen if I came down from heaven and I told you, Kellen, I didn't plan for you to get a spouse? What is the worst that can happen? And I was seated there thinking, but okay, what is the worst that can happen? I will still go to heaven. And for me, this is not to trivialize the importance of marriage. Like, not so many of us are designed for singleness, but to calm down a bit and magnify be objective God about it and just magnify God and live your life for what God has given it to you for, to be devoted to Christ. And it is that same Christ that will bring all the other things. But when we try to, like he says, seek first the kingdom. So we have to seek him first. But when you seek these other things first, that's where the enemy gets a loophole. Because he has got you to put your faith in that thing more than in God. They will tell you, do this just to marry you, and you'll do it. A guy will tell you, get pregnant for me just to marry you, and you will do it. And then it's not a guarantee that he will marry you. If you end up a single mother, like Satan is winning, because he's furthering his agenda of dysfunction and no family and children raised in a way that they will hate God still. Wow.
I'm so blessed by this conversation. I hope you who's listening in are also blessed by this. Kellen, are you going to write any? No, I think yes. When is the next project coming up? Are you already writing another book?
My first book, I'm doing a second edition of it, so it will be out 10th November. It will be out. Then
in just a few days.
In just a few days. Then, of course, I have other ideas. My goal this year was to write that other new book, but I don't know if I can pull it off. I've written bits and pieces of it here and there. I need to just collect my manuscripts, but I have other books coming up, but I do have a website where I consistently write blog posts here and there, so people can
go there. And what's the website? Please share.
KellenKenlin.com.
Kellen, that's K-E-L-L.
Like the Twitter handle. And then .com.
Kellen Kenlin. Kellen is with a double L. And then Kenlin is KENLYN.com. And you can find her material there. How does somebody buy your book?
My book is in Uganda Bookshop. It's in Mokono Bookshop. It's also on Amazon. I hope it will be in a restock next month.
All right. Thank you so much for coming through, sharing with us on vulnerability, relationships, and just helping someone out there, start to rethink and start, that journey of the self-search and maybe even end up in therapy. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Now it's a minute to 12 p.m. The news will be coming through. David Oboy will be coming in